was telling you guys how the Swartz and Trooper Amish all send their kids to one school, so they have to pack their school lunches because they have like an Amish school, doesn't have a cafeteria or anything. And I said how I used to love packing pies for desserts, but I needed to have pie crusts on hand, and it made me realize that a lot of you guys probably don't know how to make pie crusts, and you probably usually buy them. I didn't know you could buy pie crusts until after I left the Amish. I was already 18, I think, when I learned it, and I did buy them one time. I was not impressed with it. I'm going to show you guys how I make mine because it's cheaper, it takes way less ingredients, and it's really simple. We're going to start off with some pastry flour. You can use all-purpose flour, which will make it a lot cheaper, but I like my pastry flour because it's never fail, and that's what I always used growing up. We're going to add our salt in there as well, and then we have lard, and I'm using homemade lard. The Amish made this. We always made our own growing up too, but you can use store-bought lard. And if you don't like using lard, you can always just use softened butter, although I would recommend not using quite as much, maybe a tablespoon less per cup. I'm making a double batch, so it will make a lot of pie crust because one batch makes 3 pie crusts. Now before we go in here to knead this in with our hands, we're going to make our wet stuff first. You need an egg per batch. I'm making 2 batches, so I need 2 eggs. Then we're going to add quite a bit of cold water to those eggs. Then we also take some white vinegar. This makes it nice and crumbly without letting it just break apart. Let's take a fork and whisk that stuff together a little bit. We always used our little egg beater when I was growing up, but you don't need to mess up an egg beater to do that. We always had a little manual one. I don't have the smaller ones right now. I'm just going to use a fork. And we're going to set that aside, and we're going to take our flour and lard and salt, and we're just going to go in with our hand and knead that together until it's nice and crumbly. I learned to make this pie crust when I was 5 or 6 years old. I was really small. I barely remember it. I've been kneading this stuff for years, and I never used a written down recipe. Mom always told me how much to use, and I learned it over time. I did not know Mom had a written down recipe until I was a teenager. One time I stumbled across it, and I was surprised, but Mom said, yeah, that's the recipe she uses, so that's the recipe I'm still using today. She got it from her mom, so that's why I didn't know it was written down. Once that's crumbly, just dump your egg and water and vinegar mixture in there. It doesn't have to be perfectly crumbly as long as it's like mixed together a little bit. We're just going to knead that in. It should turn into a nice pastry dough. If it's too stiff, you can add a little bit more water. If it's not stiff enough, you can just add a little bit more flour. It's not fussy. When I was growing up, we bought our pastry flour in 50-pound bags. We did not fresh mill it at home, and we also usually bought our all-purpose flour in 50-pound bags because we usually didn't fresh mill that at home either. We bought our cane sugar in 50-pound bags. Our brown sugar came in 50-pound bags. And we just dump it out into plastic 5-gallon buckets to use it. And now my dough is done. You might not want it this stiff, so just add a little bit of water, but it doesn't matter if it is this stiff. You can just freeze this and keep it for later, or you can roll it out and freeze it, or you can bake it and store it for up to 2 weeks at room temperature and up to 2 months in the fridge. But I'm going to take mine and roll some out and make 1 crust, and I'm going to put the rest in the freezer for now anyways. I'll use it later. You need a floured surface. Put your dough on there, and then we're going to put a little bit of flour on top, just like you do with regular dough anyways, like say you're rolling out cinnamon rolls or something, and just roll it out. You can roll it out really thin or a little bit thicker. It depends on how thick you like your pie crust. And if you're baking a pie crust, you need to lightly flour your pie pan, and this thing looks a little weird because it was standing in water for a day or so it has some stains. But I don't want to use a glass one because the crust doesn't bake as good in a glass pie pan. Once you have it in there, make sure you get as many of the air bubbles out as you can so it doesn't make bubbles when it's baking. But it doesn't have to be perfect because the crust needs holes in it before you bake it too. And it doesn't matter if it has some cracks in the edges and stuff because it does not need to be perfect to taste good. Cut the excess off. Mom always taught us to use the back of a table knife. And then Mom taught us to pinch it. You use your thumb and your forefinger and you just go like that and pinch it. Like that all around. Now for the holes I was talking about, you can use a fork and just punch it full of holes, or you can use something like this. This is a vinegar chuck cap off of eBay. You can just buy the vinegar chuck and the cap and use it like this and just press it down in there so it has holes so it can breathe. Then we stick it in the oven. Once you have it poked full of your holes with the fork or the vinegar cap, whatever you're using, and it does not take long to bake this. You just bake it till it's slightly light brown and you can shake it around. It's loose in the pan. And just like that, you have a homemade pie crust with no preservatives in it, very little ingredients. You made it yourself. You know what is in it. And it's actually very cheap. It's cheaper than buying it at the store. And I hope if you have kids, you teach them how to make this, because knowing how to make a pie crust out of the blue is a very handy trait to have, especially if you like desserts like me. And if you want this recipe to learn it yourself or teach your kids or whatever, it is in my cookbook under pie crust. On page 26, the cookbook is available on my website socialsbylavina.com, which I have linked over here on my profile, or depending what platform you're on, it might be in the caption of this video. You can just go to your browser app, type into the search bar socialsbylavina.com, and my website will pop up. Enjoy!